I work in an aerospace machine shop, and so this is kind of the environment I'm in. The day-to-day. Bolts into brass. I watch the sun rise through a jug of methyl ethyl ketone. Somebody put the window tint up wrong. It's rippled, and the air pockets refract the light as a dull blue inside the fish tank of my mornings. The man across the aisle takes a break from the break he's been taking, while his parts soak in coolant like a milk bath. It's likely I won't remember any of this after breathing aluminum dust 10 hours a day another 4 years. For now, I listen to the radio like a thief. There's a pledge drive on to keep things free. But I'm already there. I've got a busy social schedule, staring out funny windows, canceling all my plans, and falling in love twice a week. Forgot my beret. This is called Lonesome Whippoorwills, which you'll probably recognize as a Hank Williams song. I used to play steel guitar for a girl who sang country cover songs and gigged a little at some of the local bars. We practiced in her apartment every Sunday afternoon, strumming quietly so as not to wake her infant son in the next room. We rendered the song so there were no loud parts, like the tunes themselves were on morphine, Quaaludes, or whichever combination of pills Hank Williams took before he died, in the back seat of that rented Cadillac as it steered toward the next show in the night. The girl had no husband, but all the same I sat at the very edge of her couch each week, ready to slip my boots on if I heard a car roll out into the driveway. After a month, I got used to the arrangement. She began cooking us corn chowders and pasta. I started showing up with wine and dessert. We hardly played music. Instead, we talked about our jobs and people we both knew. We talked about money and buying used cars. I even stayed late enough to meet her son, played with him while she washed the dishes. One evening, she mapped my astrological chart by hand and told me she now knew I preferred women more beautiful than her. I couldn't disagree. So I left the two of them waving from the complex parking lot as if I were heading off to war or maybe the moon or some other place men never return from. I still see her around town at times. She has either gained weight or lost it. I know she's grown out her hair. Her son has changed too. I hide from them, like I owe child support. I cross the street so as not to say hello. This is called Instant Undertaker. Riding my bike home from work past the park, I see a boy and a girl trying to herd an adolescent crow into a plastic sled with a pair of paint stirrers. I stop and ask them how the little thing is doing, and they say they think it broke its back. I tell them I raised a few crows when I was their age, and offer to give the bird a look. Sure enough, the crow's head is twisted full around to its wings, and the rest of it is in the same miserable shape, clawing around in the dirt, grabbing hold of a twig repeatedly as it gasps toward the maple above us. The boy asks me if I think the crow will die, and I tell him it already is, but it might take a long time. The girl says they had to chase bugs off of it because it was starting to be eaten when they found it. I ask the kids if they live nearby and if they could fetch me a shovel. When they leave, I carry the crow into a shrub and lay it down on some beauty bark to wait. The two come back with an old post holder, and I tell them now to both go and get a plastic bag. They look at me confused, like they are only beginning to figure all of this out. And we're going to go into the book. My book, Beasts and Violins, came out in April on Red Hen Press, which is a really great experience. And I've been doing a lot of readings. This is kind of the last leg before I kind of build up my vacation hours again and get back to it. I've been down to LA. I came down in September and I read at the Annenberg. And I went to New York and went to Denver and had a nice trip. We're going to start with a work poem. It's called My Boss is a Jewish Carpenter. There are 2 poems in this book based on bumper stickers. My boss is a Jewish carpenter. My only hope is that the driver of the lakeside septic truck, with its coiled, feces-stained tubes and its load of metal cylinder filled with bourgeois shit, had a sense of humor when he placed that blue sticker with bold white letters on his chrome bumper. But to suggest Jesus Christ is alive and well and running a business in the greater Seattle area, draining crap out of homes with waterfront views, is too much for one man to reflect on, waiting to enter the freeway from a metered ramp at rush hour. I either need to pull over or out. For a while I lived in Bisbee, Arizona, which is down the Mexican border. This is a poem about that. It's called For the Topless Girls in the Brewery Gulch. With wet fur coats framing naked tits, you danced in the new year on the narrow drive between St. Elmo's Bar and the Stock Exchange Saloon. There were 3 of you, a small posse in like uniform. Your hair was stuck to your face, so when you shook your heads, the strands tore off strips of foundation. In the right light, the negatives looked like tiger stripes. It was raining. Tomorrow was a holiday. Everyone knew this desert water was poison. Of course, you were drunk. The mariachi band members were done up as if they had been dug from a graveyard, with a tuba wrapped around a skeleton and a zombie with a green, decaying fist pulling on a trombone. They'd come out of the club to play on the sidewalk, elevated 3 feet above the trench of the road. Writhing down there, we were like the living dead, clawed from underground. Your fur coats were getting soaked. It made them smell more musty, halfway to rotten. Runoff was threatening to wash away your high heels. Maybe that's what happened to your shirts. Of course, you had to be wearing tight white pants, so when they became stuck to your asses, your thongs were obvious from my vantage against a brick wall. I wasn't single then. I lived with that girl up the canyon. You all knew her, small town. But I'd put her to bed early, told her I was going to stay up a little longer, and walk downtown. When I saw what was waiting for me there, of course I thought about cheating, but the giant whitewashed bee on the hillside above us wasn't for beautiful because you weren't. It couldn't have been for breasts because soon the cops showed up and your coats were buttoned, leaving nothing but your sternums exposed, shiny with steam above whatever animals you wore. The bee could have been for board, for me unloading trucks and working a register, barely full-time in a grocery store at the edge of the pit mine. For me living with someone who spent all of her time in the tub. But that feeling was more discontentment, which starts with a D and isn't advertised. It's kept for silence and late nights alone in crowds. And watching nude girls dance is all satisfaction and self-loathing. When the ladies were carted off and the band put to rest, I started home. It was after midnight. The celebration was over. Postal workers were out of their uniforms. They wore fringed suede jackets and walked beyond the gulch with painted staffs. What I liked best about living in East Missoula. Those summer nights in Hellgate Canyon, I used to breathe smoke from lodgepole pine wildfires and admire how no one I knew could visit me there. Everybody to the west would only have been allowed to wait, parked on the interstate just past Idaho, watching billboards burn like advertisements for impending madness, hearing about alternate routes closed by the hour. Sometimes, sitting on the concrete porch, I could get a dried urine whiff off some methamphetamine trailer down the block. And that didn't seem too bad a drug, and Montana didn't seem too poor a place. It was called the Buck. By spring, the headless buck, strung upside down in my neighbor's cyclone dog pen, is not only lord of the magpies, which feed on frozen strips of flesh from within the hollow of his ice cave torso, and cluck while loafing on his bald flanks, but also over a pair of mule deer doe, long dead, finally unveiled in cold slush. Each dawn I cannot help the notion I'm incorrectly dressed to be graveside attendant behind kitchen glass, where I stumble through pots to boil eggs, no less in my skin than the buck. To write his winter spent preserving, gutless in a backyard, I almost want to hire the Mormon family band that plays traditionals down at the market, since there are no farmers there this soon in the year, and those kids look so suited for death in their blacks and whites with doilies at their collars and wrists. I would have them all sing for the buck, him in his shit-covered kennel, with the magpies and his harem, and his 5-point head dropped in a hole, silver-tipped cowboy boots and runoff, mandolins and limbs, I could shoot a short film, see how, in any season at the farmer's market, it wouldn't sell a tape. I went in with my hands up. It's got an epigraph from Thomas McGrath. It's from Letter to Imaginary Friend, which is one of my favorite epic poems. Sweet Jesus at morning, the queenly women of our youth, those monumental creatures of our summer lust. It was a little like that pregnant black heifer stuck in the aluminum feeder box sized specifically for calves, jackknifed, full on muesli and seed, her head turned out toward the snowy morning. Me and that 80-year-old Irishman had to lift it, the several hundred pounds of green metal, knowing, with our elbows hefted above our divergent hairlines and our ankles foundered in thick pasture mud, we would be totally exposed. And she'd be coming out in a hurry, big and taut around the middle, us just hoping she wouldn't lose her calf in the fuss. It was a little like that, stopping by the girl's house the other night, except without the help. And this doesn't come out right. I would never be so pig-headed as to compare a woman to a cow, just to compare the parameters using the inconsequential vessel of simile. I didn't even know what horns that heifer bore, what spawn might be brewing within her black belly. But it had to be done. She had to be turned loose. I kept my legs, and one doesn't count as a stampede. I listen to a lot of old folk music, and most folk songs are about killing somebody down by a river. And so this is along that vein. It's called An Upstream Toe for an Early Date. Because I cannot tie one knot well, I tie several, and that's how it was in Oregon, launching off that rotten dock, with the birds in the brush, oblivious to their names, and the river rocks, the look of brown trout spotted by shade. I tried to call the smell of the water. It was mineral mostly, with algae that had grown sweet as cheese. The scent was as much from the oaks. Their stinking roots along the bank made the whole scene fecund, sexy, like a body had been hidden somewhere. My kayak hauled its rented mate behind, bearing a girl strange in a straw hat. Had we harsher personalities, it could have become that folk song. The trip would have been traditional if I'd left her dead in the weeds, forever refusing to wed, while I sulked homeward, weeping for mother. Except I was paddling against the flow, and it was too hot to think of murder or the possibility of marriage. Or any tune better than the water beat. The girl was harming nothing but my arms, which are muscled only as weight allows, and screamed with blood each time the line jerked taut. In a twilight town. At these hours, a girl shows me the scar she earned after her father's chainsaw bucked against her calf while he evened the backyard stumps. It cut clear to my meat, she says. They had to fly me to the city. The rough, shiny lump is not grotesque. Her leg has grown around the wound, same as how trees will hatchet strikes. She still wears skirts for now because her body won't be a woman's for a few more years, and free magazine offers don't come this far out in the country. The bald slice through one eyebrow is either from barbed wire or dog. Could have been her brother before they sent him to that school for boys just like him. I'd like to hear about all those goldfish that never survived through winter on her parents' porch. I'd like to know how the couch felt when it froze through. But the plane for the mail route is spinning on, and this place will always be her stop. The night makes us all older, and just walking toward it, she covers her thighs with the dark. Thank you.